Welcome to Anews. I'm amidst, and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. From Turkey's deepening support for the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus to growing instability across Syria and the Caucasus, and from Gaza's worsening humanitarian crisis to Israel's internal political turmoil, tensions are boiling across the region. As displacement, hunger, and power struggles escalate, we'll analyze what lies ahead for the Middle East. Joining me on the program today are Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, and political analyst, Javed Rana.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan spoke to journalists on his return flight from the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus to Turkiye on Sunday. President Erdogan evaluated Turkiye's foreign policy engagements and recent regional and global geopolitical developments.
We have reiterated our support for the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. We have affirmed our commitment to the vision of a two-state solution in Cyprus and the reality that there are two distinct peoples and two distinct states on the island. The key to a solution in Cyprus is a two-state solution, and there will be no compromise on this. We will not participate in any process that fails to guarantee the sovereign equality and security of the Turkish Cypriot people. We continue our efforts to ensure the prosperity of our Turkish Cypriot brothers and sisters.
On developments in Syria, Erdogan praised Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara for his firm stance amid growing regional tensions.
Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara has taken a firm stance there. So far, there's been no compromise. Israel is constantly trying to set the entire region ablaze. In the face of this effort, Syria's stance has allowed the process to proceed cautiously. The Syrian people, in all their segments, have learned from the suffering they've endured in the past and are absolutely unwilling to fall for these tricks. The Syrian leader has taken a very positive step here. We have also assured them that we will provide them with every support. Israel does not want stability in the region. It believes a unified Syria would be undesirable for it, and it continues such provocations.
Reaffirming Turkey's stance against terrorism, the Turkish leader highlighted the country's determination to ensure regional security and unity.
We are determined to build a future free of terrorism. We know very clearly what we will do to achieve our goal, how we will do it, and where we will ultimately end up. The events unfolding in our region once again demonstrate the validity of this step we have taken. YPG's stance can change at any time. We do not want Syria to be fragmented, and we see Syria's recovery as a positive development for our country. Syria's recovery will also positively impact its relations with us.
Turning to Gaza, the Turkish president voiced strong condemnation of Israel's military campaign and expressed solidarity with the Palestinian people.
The people of Gaza have not surrendered yet, and I believe they will not. Israel is attacking everywhere like a ravenous monster, and it will fall victim to this ambition. We have never let Gaza off our radar and will not. We will continue to stand with Gaza. The international community, which has consistently supported Israel, is no longer in a position to hide anything. Everyone agrees on what needs to be done. They have entered a spiral of despair. They are pressing very hard for a ceasefire.
On the Zangezur corridor, he underscored its strategic value and called for regional cooperation to make it a symbol of peace and prosperity.
The Zangezur corridor will benefit the countries in the region. We view this corridor as extremely important due to its geo-economics dimension. Indeed, this line will connect regions beyond our region and stimulate trade. Our fundamental expectation is that this line will become a symbol of consensus, not a source of conflict. This will enable the region to become a prosperous area where cooperation prevails. I believe that, as countries in the region, we can resolve this issue through consensus.
Welcome back to the program. Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mark.
Dr. Mehmet, we were just watching this news report on President Erdogan and the different statements that he made on his return trip from the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. But let's begin with two important meetings that are happening this week. Tomorrow, there's Russia and Ukraine. They're meeting in Istanbul. And on Friday, there's a meeting between Iran and the E3. So, Mehmet, let's start with the Russia-Ukraine meeting. Where do we stand right now? What could be a part of these negotiations?
So, as you know, Omar, just for our viewers, if we were to summarize what happened before, previously they made in May and June, twice in Istanbul. Unfortunately, not very concrete results came from these meetings, other than just some of the prisoners exchange and things like that. And in this meeting as well, we don't expect a very big outcome, like a breakthrough that will put an end to the ongoing war since 2022. Nevertheless, I think it's an important platform where they meet in Istanbul and they exchange some of the concerns or some of the demands from one another. In the previous ones, especially the one in May, that there were high expectations. But I think since then, due to the inconsistency between European side and the US part, the fact that Russia has made some strategic gains territorially in Ukraine has been putting some sort of a dent into this hope that these talks will lead to a ceasefire. I don't think a ceasefire will be established even in the talks tomorrow in Istanbul, but still I think the fact that there is a platform, the fact that the dialogue channels are open, it's still a big gain for diplomacy. And in tomorrow's meeting, still, there will be some exchange of information regarding some of the prisoners or some of the children, especially, that are still abducted. For that, we are still unsure how much more substantial results will come out after tomorrow's meeting. Because as you know, even when we are going into the meetings, even on the day off, things change very drastically. At least this has been the experience from the past two meetings. So far we don't expect a ceasefire, of course, but I think some small steps towards that, establishing at least some sort of understanding for future meetings will come. But right now, the fact that Russia has gained some strategic territory and they have the psychological advantage, I think, they are holding their cards a lot higher than they normally would do. And I think even Trump's comment about Putin, I think put a dent on that relationship that could have translated into a ceasefire, but the relationship between Putin and President Trump. I think that is also suffering as the time passes by and as the time these talks linger longer as they are not translating into something that's more concrete towards a ceasefire, then I think it's been affected negatively.
Mehmet, now it's an achievement that Russian and Ukrainian delegations are even meeting in Istanbul, because last week we saw how Trump approved he's going to send those Patriot missile defense systems to Ukraine. Now, how is Russia going to react to this development?
Well, U.S. sending Patriots is a reaction to Russia's airstrikes and very heavy bombardment and the gains also in terms of territory. We know that Russia is using that psychological advantage and territorial gain to make more moves on Ukraine as these talks are ongoing. But at the same time, Trump had this compromising approach in the beginning, and I think that tolerance for Putin is coming to an end from Trump's side. Nevertheless, I think Trump's unpredictability and Trump, his ability to change his positions very drastically and frequently makes it hard for us to predict what will be the next position in case Russia intensifies strikes on Ukraine, in case Russia gains more strategic areas, or they are just basically saying that the exit strategy for this war is not through diplomacy. Then the U.S. may intensify. But right now, I don't think this is something that is on Trump's agenda. He does not want to escalate tensions, be it in Ukraine or elsewhere, because his sole focus, he wants to make sure that is on Asia Pacific. And I think the wars in the Middle East, the Ukraine dossier is keeping Trump much busier than he anticipated.
Mehmet, what about the second meeting that's on Friday, 25th July, involving Iran? What's on the agenda?
So Iran is resuming these nuclear talks with the E3 countries from Europe, namely Germany, France, and the UK. This is not a very high-level meeting. It's at the Deputy Foreign Ministers meeting in Istanbul on Friday. Previously, again, as the Russia, actually right prior to the 12-day war, at times in those days where it was starting, actually, they had another meeting in Istanbul. But this is just to keep that diplomatic channel open. If there will be some resumption of these nuclear talks between Europe and the Iranian side. Right now, I mean, again, this is not, we don't expect a breakthrough in this one either. But the fact that there is these resumption in the talks between the E3 and Iran, it's also a positive sign. But how much these talks are being affected, if since the 12-day war, or since Iran's facilities were damaged and regime's position has changed with regards to that, this is something that time will show. But Europeans do not have a very compromising position anymore compared to prior to, I think, the 12-day war. We'll see what happens. I mean, these talks are very small step, both from Ukraine and Russia aside, and also this other meeting on nuclear talks between Iran. There is some boiling tensions, but the dialogue channels are very narrow. They're very small. It's hard to make big gains, but still, I think diplomacy is given a chance, and that's a positive sign. And the fact that they're being held in Istanbul shows Turkey's, I think, mediator role in these several conflicts around its region. And Turkey wants to establish that peace, be it in Iran, be it in the Middle East, in Syria, or elsewhere, or Ukraine and Russia. Turkey is still opening that door and wants to make sure that it remains open, and facilitating these meetings in Istanbul is part of that agenda.
Mehmet, let's revisit Turkish President Erdogan's statements that he made yesterday while he was returning back to Turkey. Now, I'll start with Syria. He said that Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara has taken a firm stance. Turkey will provide them with every support, and Israel does not want stability in the region. These are some of the key phrases that were released by President Erdogan. What do you make of this, Mehmet?
So Mr. Erdogan yesterday, he delivered, his remarks came from his answers to journalists on his way back from Cyprus. I think there was a phrase he used where he described the issue in the Middle East. And he said the main strategic problem in the Middle East is Israel's motivation, or Israel's behavior that wants to always expand territorially and invade surrounding countries. I think this is a big issue in the Middle East. As part of this problem is also the fact that through this sectarian or ethnic-based tensions in Syria, Israel wants to instigate the turmoil there. Syria is going through a very fragile process right now as they're trying to rebuild. And I think they have established a very good coherence, at least as a first step, at least as a first, the very basic ground that they need to establish for their unity, for their territorial unity or political authority in the country. Many of the different segments or fractions or different ethnic or different sects have already put their support behind Ahmed al-Shara. There are two that are still in conflict, two main ones, I would say. One is the YPG, and there is, of course, Turkey's determined a very firm position on the YPG and how they are coordinating that integration into Syria with the Damascus government. But the other problem in the southern Syria is the Druze community that is very fragmented. And one of the factions within Druze community is those that support Hikmet al-Hijri, a Druze leader that is basically used as a proxy or as an instigator in Syria to spread the instability or to reignite some of the tensions that have been calmed for a good few months now. Not all Druze, first of all, we need to understand, not all Druze are supporting the Hikmet al-Hijri. Actually, in fact, even some of the tribes and the Druze in Sweden, they have come to confront one another. They have actually mentioned that, we don't have a problem with the Druze community, and they have been calm, and the authority has been given to the police or the actual the forces of the government. But there is a very small fractions that receive support from Israel that, led by Hikmet al-Hijri, that actually put this tension between other Druze community and also with the central government, with the other tribes. So there's a few things. One, we should know that this instigation is part of Israel's expansion into Syria, beyond Golan Heights, beyond the occupied Golan Heights, and the aim to connect this Sueda corridor all the way to the north with the YPG. I mean, there are some reports that this is the actual aim, and this is what they want to establish as part of their, the Promised Land agenda, this ideological approach to their plans, or to their, this theological interpretation of how they want to move forward with their expansion in the region. So that's the one thing. The other thing, I think it's also very important to highlight that not all Druze support this tension. Be it the Druze community in Lebanon, be it the Druze community in Syria. There is about 3% of the Syrian population is the Druze community, but only a small, about 750,000 of them, but only a small portion of this is instigating this situation. In the central Sueda, there is still that tension, there is still that heat, but overall there is still a ceasefire in place. There is still that consensus that they want to make sure they solve this tension through dialogue. The majority of Druze community, this is what they agree with, but that small fraction is doing things that are actually triggering reaction from the tribes, Bedouin tribes in Syria. And due to that, it's still a very fragile ceasefire. It's still a very, the tribes, they claim that they kill their children and they abduct their women and things like that, which are very unacceptable, and they burn their house, they say. This is some of the tribes that actually talk to our sister channel, Ahaber, live from Syria. Our colleagues were there. But overall, I think this main strategic problem phrase that used by Erdogan show that Syria wants to rebuild itself, but Israel is the one that wants to see that fail. Why they want to see that fail? Because they want to use that as an opportunity to make more gains territorially. And this is something that's dangerous, not only for Syria's territorial integrity, but if Syria's instability is not established, the whole region is affected by that. Not just Syria itself, but Iraq will be affected, Iran will be affected, Turkey will be affected, and of course, we should look at it not just from a security and political aspect, but humanitarian aspect. These people's, the Syrian people, they have suffered for a very long time. More than 5 million of them were in Turkey. Several millions are displaced internally. Many of them tried to go to Europe. The Aegean Sea itself has turned into a graveyard for those who want to cross into Europe. So for all, I think when we're talking about this, one thing that we should not forget is the humanitarian aspect. And this is something that the region cannot afford anymore. So I think those who have leverage over Israel, especially with Trump administration, I mean, we hear about this, these reports that from the White House, some of the White House officials speaking to Axios, saying that Trump didn't even know about these airstrikes into Damascus from Israel. So I think if the U.S. has this leverage over Netanyahu, if the President Trump has this leverage over Netanyahu, it is about time that they actually sit down and put a limit to how much room Israel can have or should have when it comes to these moves that they are making.
Mehmet, the second issue is the YPG. Now, Erdogan says the YPG stance can change at any time. How are you looking at that? Because there are some reports now which state that the YPG is not, is not willing to integrate within the Syrian army. So how does that work in this situation?
Well, I mean, the YPG is dragging their feet for some more gains, be it political leverage or military, or in terms of having this autonomy and security in the areas they're occupying or they're under their control. But nevertheless, I think there's a dual position, U.S. position here when it comes to YPG integration. On the one hand, we hear Ambassador Tom Barak, who is also the special envoy to Syria, saying there's no autonomy for YPG. They need to integrate into the new Syrian administration. On the other hand, we see that this is not actually materializing. If the U.S. has leverage, if the U.S. has control over that process or is part of that process, I think they need to put their foot on the ground and make sure that this happens quicker than it is taking time. Why this is important? Because first of all, for Syria's unity, for Syria's political coherence, this is important. This is one thing. The other thing, Turkey is going through this terror-free initiative with PKK laying down arms, and they want to make sure that all different fractions under the PKK are part of this. And YPG is no different than the PKK. They are basically part of the same organization, just operating under different names in northern Syria. And YPG's dissolving or laying down arms and integrating into Syria, this is also very important. Now, what Mr. Erdogan said in terms of YPG, some things can happen with regards to YPG in the near future. New developments can happen. We don't know what that means. Why? Because this means that this can mean one thing in terms of YPG's integration can be sped up. On the other hand, it could also mean that Turkey is running out of time and they can conduct a cross-border operation. I mean, it could mean either on the either edge, but he didn't expand on that point. But nevertheless, I think Turkey is using diplomacy to make sure that happens, because Turkey cannot afford to have a terror entity along its border in northern Syria for its own security, but also for this redevelopment or rebuilding of Syria that Turkey is putting a major support in, be it politically supporting the interim government, or be it financially or in other ways, in terms of rebuilding the infrastructure. Turkey is making sure that is not, there's not some road accidents affecting, as Turkey is trying to have this comprehensive approach to some of the regional dynamics.
Mehmet, thank you for that analysis. We'll be right back with you.
Thank you.
U.S. President Donald Trump was reportedly caught off guard by Israel's military strikes in Syria and called Prime Minister Netanyahu to address the situation.
Hundreds of Bedouin civilians evacuated Syria's predominantly Druze city of Suwaida on Monday. The exodus is part of a US-backed truce meant to end fighting that has killed hundreds of people, state media and witnesses said. The ceasefire took hold on Sunday as Interior Ministry security forces deployed on Suwaida's outskirts, allowing for the release of hostages and detainees held by the warring sides. A second large group of civilians will be evacuated if the situation remains calm, a Syrian security forces member said. The fighting began a week ago with clashes between Bedouin and Druze fighters. The Druze are a small but influential minority in Syria, Israel and Lebanon. They follow a religion that is an offshoot of a branch of Islam. Citing the goal of protecting the Druze and keeping southern Syria demilitarized, Israel attacked government forces last week in the south and struck the defense ministry in Damascus. Washington, which has expressed support for Syria since Sharar met US President Donald Trump in May, said it did not approve of Israel's strikes.
Well, look, the president enjoys a good working relationship with Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and stays in frequent communication with him. He was caught off guard by the bombing in Syria and also the bombing of a Catholic church in Gaza, which, as you know, I addressed at my briefing last week. And in both accounts, the president quickly called the prime minister to rectify those situations. And we saw Secretary Rubio intervene when it came to Syria. We saw a de-escalation there. And as for the
Welcome back. Now let's take a look at the front page of Daily Sabah. Mehmet, as we were talking a while ago, there are many problems in the region, especially what's happening in Syria and the Israeli invasion of this region, which has become a main problem, according to Daily Sabah. Explain us more, Mehmet, and tell me more about this picture that we're seeing here.
So, Omar, we talked about some of the issues. We talked about the E3 meeting. We talked about what Erdogan meant by this main strategic problem in the region as Israel continues to expand different areas in terms of their territorial plans. But I think there is still, we talk about Syria, we talk about different things, we talk about Ukraine, Iran talks, but Gaza is still there, Omar. This is very, very heartbreaking. There is a bleeding wound in our region, and the whole international community is just simply watching what is unfolding. And I'm not just talking about some buildings being bombed. I'm not just talking about some infrastructure being damaged. I am not even talking about some airstrikes. There is a much more major problem that is happening in Gaza right now, and that is the hunger problem. People are actually starving to death, and starvation is being used by Israel as a weapon against civilians in Gaza. They have told them to move beyond, from one neighborhood to another. But, the picture that we are seeing on our screen right now is a school where thousands of people were actually seeking shelter. And Israel told them to leave, and they just bombarded it. So that it's not even, the civilians don't even have shelter in a school where they can move into or seek safety. Now, starvation, and I'm going back to starvation, the whole international community is watching this live. All the international NGOs, all the humanitarian groups, all the UN agencies. Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur, is very vocal about this. Everybody at the people's level internationally is talking about seeing these images coming out from Gaza. It's very heartbreaking. But I think it's just saying that it is heartbreaking doesn't take away from our responsibility to speak about what is happening in Gaza. I think international community, some of the European countries are now becoming more vocal about what is Israel doing to Gaza civilians in terms of starving them to death. But it's time for action. Words are not enough. Words are not sufficient. And words will not take away from our responsibility to act against this. I think the international community is failing to do that, especially those who have leverage and they can put pressure on Israel, particularly some of the European countries and, of course, the main actor, United States.
Mehmet, also, it says here, Israeli tanks roll into Gaza's Deir al-Balah despite hostage concerns. Now, Deir al-Balah was one region which was bombed heavily, but there were no ground troops. Now, Israel is sending ground troops to Deir al-Balah to show that it's going to capture more territory. And now, today, right now, Israel has occupied 70% of the occupied Gaza Strip. So this is another reason to realize that Israel's, it wants to occupy the entire region.
Israel wants to eliminate every single Palestinian, be it a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old. Women, children, doesn't matter. They want to minimize or actually bring the number of Palestinians in Gaza to zero. Anyone that is left behind, Israel does not accept that. They don't see them as a human being, first of all. So they want to eliminate, depopulate Gaza so that they can actually capture that area. I mean, this has been the very sheer, very clear plan since day one. Of course, you know, there's many different plans about what will happen to these civilians, but there is very basic, very swift actions that must be taken to minimize death from starvation. In 2025, this is being recorded in history, and we will have we will be held accountable in our consciousness, not because the international community didn't act to stop this. Those who have power, those who are in power, those who have power to stop this, if they're not doing that right now, they will be, when they have a moment in the future to think about today, they will not feel at ease in their consciousness.
Dr. Mehmet, thank you for that analysis on the latest developments from the occupied Gaza Strip. Now let's take a look at this news report, and we'll be right back.
With Gaza's water and sanitation systems decimated by months of war and Israel continuing to block fuel and infrastructure repairs, clean water is in short supply for over 2 million displaced Palestinians. Many now rely entirely on sporadic truck deliveries. And when water trucks do turn up, desperate crowds clutching plastic jugs and containers rush to gather around them. Aya Madalal, a displaced woman, is forced to come to get water as her husband was hit by a bullet while waiting to get water.
حاليا رجال ونسوان كلنا بنجري ورا الميه بس احنا قاعدين بس في الخيام نستنى دور الميه الحلوه دور الميه المالحه وانا فعليا كان زوجي اللي يجي يعني هنا على الميه بس زوجي الحمد لله رب العالمين اخذ رصاصه في راسه لسه ما طلعت يعني فاضطريت انا اللي اجري على الميه.
The Associated Press followed Luai Abu Nukera, a 31-year-old truck driver from Rafah, as he delivered water.
بنحاول قدر المستطاع انه نخدم ناس كثير في النقله بنقسمها على 3 مخيمات مخيمين اوقات النقله بننزلها في مكان واحد على هوا ضغط الناس فالامور الناس الوضع صعب عندها فلا في براميل ولا في اي حاجه الناس تقدر تستخدمها المي مالحه مش موجوده فالناس قد ما يقدروا بياخذوا ميه بيستخدموها للغسيل وللأكل وللشرب ولكل شيء.
He has been distributing water to camps since the early days of the war, filling his tank at a desalination plant in Deir al-Bala before heading south. The situation has taken its toll on him.
أنا بالنسبة لي أنا تعبت نفسيا، طبعا الناس الوضع صعب جدا. أنا عن نفسي إرهاق وتعب وقلة أكل ويعني شعور لا يوصف.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now from the Pakistani capital is political analyst Javed Rana. Javed, welcome to the program. Javed, we were just, I believe we have a technical issue.
I can't hear. If you can hear me, I can't hear.
We can hear you now, Javed.
I can't hear.
I believe we're having a technical issue, so Mehmet, I will come back to you. Mehmet, we were talking about starvation, right, in the occupied Gaza Strip. We know how the GHF has been responding, apparently providing Palestinians with aid. But that's not happening because people who are going there to get that aid, they're being killed while standing in queues. How are Palestinian communities, Mehmet, responding to these challenges? What are they seeking right now?
I mean, Omar, right now, in this the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, GHF, this is a system created to kill, I think, more people in Gaza. And why do I say that? I think we have seen images coming from there. We have seen the developments unfolding as they are attacking people lining up for a very small amount of humanitarian aid and food. If this is not a way to reorganize or re-strategize and a way to make killing easier than what it is. You know, they're bombing people lining up for that one small bit of food for their family. If this is not if this is not the description of being barbaric, then what it is? You know, we can go back and talk about World War II and the Holocaust and the tragedy that took place at that time. We can talk about what happened in Srebrenica. We can talk about what happened in Rwanda. We can talk about what happened in different parts of the world in terms of different sectarian conflicts. We can talk about what happened in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. But what is taking place in Gaza is really something different. And hunger is being used by one of the most advanced militaries in the world, supported by a superpower of the world, against unarmed civilians, against children, women, and civilians as a weapon. Hunger. I'm not talking about airstrikes. I'm not talking about bombs. Those are weapons. They're already targeting them. They're destroying everything possible in Gaza Strip. But using hunger and starvation as a weapon, it's a very dark moment for our history. This is something that will not, should not, be let go without holding those responsible for this accountable. This is a war crime at the very basic level. At the very least, to say the least, this is just a barbaric war crime that is being used against people with what had nothing to do with this conflict. Israel is going into Gaza, occupying their lands. Israel has been occupying Palestinian land for past 7 decades, and now they're not just bombing, but using the most basic humanitarian aspects, food, shelter, water, medicine, as a weapon. I think this is something that the whole international community should sit down and think about how barbaric this situation is.
Javed Rana is back with us. Javed, I want to ask you about the problems that Benjamin Netanyahu is facing right now. At home and abroad, he has ICC arrest warrants, and the public is protesting at home. What do you make of this latest situation?
I think deeply it is their internal problem, but again, that is more important for Prime Minister Netanyahu than ICC arrest warrants, because those warrants are not going to be implemented by almost in any country. And the officials of the ICC, they have been victimized. They've been blamed for something they never did. The prosecutor has been blamed for the rape charges. It doesn't make sense. His Microsoft account has been blocked. He has been sanctioned. Judges have been sanctioned. So what to talk of actually implementing those arrest warrants? Now, again, the bigger question is that what this deep down internal political situation inside apartheid Israel is. I think this trial has been continuing since 2019 on various corruption charges, but now he has been on one way or the other. I'm talking about Netanyahu. He has been delaying it. He was indicted in 2019. Now even Netanyahu managed to seek the intervention of Donald Trump, and he just tried to create an impression in apartheid Israel that since there is a ceasefire agreement is likely to happen, so Prime Minister Netanyahu need to do that, and he needs time, so this trial should be delayed. But somehow or the other, because of the internal political dynamics in Israel, this trial is holding, and I think that could be a problematic, but I don't foresee that it will happen so soon. The reason being is that the Israeli parliament is going to go on a summer vacation for next 3 months. And the internal politics that is being now dictated by some of the two coalitions parties leaving Netanyahu, I don't think that will lead to an imminent fall of the government of Netanyahu. Reason being is, yes, they have withdrawn their support, but at the same time, they have also said that they would not be part of any effort to which could possibly lead to the collapse of the government. Though it looks like more as a pressure tactics than something happening on the ground immediately. But at the same time, my understanding is that Netanyahu is working on a plan where he can possibly go for by-elections.
Political analyst, sorry.
If I may ask Javed, what does he think about the Trump-Netanyahu friction, at least that has been reported in the media on Axios? Maybe Javed has a comment on that.
I think since the Jewish lobbies are so strong in Washington, there is obviously there have been a friction between both two leaders, but I don't expect that friction would lead to any tangible, meaningful change on the status of Gaza. The broader political objectives of the Israel, which are Zionist objectives, where I believe that the Washington is very much on that side. I don't think that is where Donald Trump would be able to have any effect on the mind of Netanyahu, because we generally call that there's a far right coalition partner with Netanyahu. I believe that Netanyahu himself is a far right. He's an extremist. It's a deadly combination of all these factors. But the very question that you're asking, I think in a broader context, since Zionism is a very much deeply embedded at every geostrategic position in Europe, in Brussels, in Washington. So I think this genocide would continue to happen, this starvation campaign would continue to happen. Reason being is they are still so strong. Yes, the public resentment all over the world has been very strong. There are no clear signs that there's no open talk against Mossad's network inside the USA. We have heard about Epstein file, but again, I think for some time to come, I don't foresee that Donald Trump would be able to influence Netanyahu or Israel's politics to a level where they can convince the leadership to withdraw forces from Gaza or stop expelling Palestinians from Gaza, because they are creating conditions. So since we do not see any change on the ground in Gaza, so I don't think that these kind of frictions and bickering between two leaders would really affect the overall picture, which has already developed from bad to the worst.
Mehmet, any final comments?
I think I agree with Javed in terms of Gaza, but in Syria, I think Trump sees a different picture, and he has a different plan for Syria. So Syria file may see some sort of shifts, or at least pause, or maybe slowing down Netanyahu may take place. But I agree definitely that Trump has a limit on influence in the Zionist lobby.
Political analyst Javed Rana, thank you for your analysis. It was a pleasure having you on the program. Dr. Mehmet, thank you for being with us in the studio. That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.